Hey folks, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I want to give you 3 tips for organizing your mix sessions and potentially mixing faster. We're going over session organization today, but before we dive in, if you are ready to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process in its entirety and really start to hone your workflow as an engineer, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and it's just a simple PDF that will walk you through the entire mixing process step by step to help you get professional and radio ready mixes without any more of the hassle and without any more of the guesswork. It is a completely free guide, and you can download it below using the link in the video description. Now let's jump in here and go over some tips for organizing your mix session. So I have a mix session pulled up here. I tried to pick one with a good amount of stuff here. So drums, bass, guitars, keys, vocals, background vocals. So we can see how everything gets laid out here. Tip number 1 for organizing your sessions better is track order. Now, what I mean by that is how you order your sessions. Now, I usually order mine the same way I would lay them out if I was working on a console, right? That's kind of the way you want to view it. So when you pull up your mix console, if you're going from left to right, everything's always going to be in the same order. So if we're looking at my mix session here from left to right, or even from top to bottom here in the edit window, we're starting with drums. So all my drums are here, kicks, snare, overheads, cymbals, room mics, that kind of thing, all the way to the far left here in my mix window, or all the way at the top in my edit window here. You can see them up at the top here. Then moving down from there, then I have bass guitar comes next, so drums, then bass guitar. You can see the bass guitar there, DI and an amp. And then they come down below here. Moving down from there and moving over in our mix window. After bass, I do electric guitars first and then acoustic guitars. You can see electric guitars here, rhythm guitars, and a lead guitar, and then a stereo pair of acoustics here. So we have drums, bass, guitars, and then more specifically electric guitars, and then acoustic guitars. From there, we move over. Then I like to have keys, and if I have anything like orchestration or effects and stuff like that, I will put that after keys here, but keys first. So piano and organ here coming after our acoustic guitars. And like I said, if I had like strings or horns or anything like that, that would go in this slot here in between keys. And then coming next, lead vocals first. So you can see our lead vocals here down below our keys here. And then after that, I like to do background vocals. So I like to separate background vocals and lead vocals. If I have harmony vocals, I'll usually dump those in the bucket here with lead vocals. So if there's things singing lead lines right along with the lead vocal, I'll put those here as harmony vocals right next to the lead vocal. Background vocals for me are more oohs and ahs, that kind of stuff that can be pushed far out to the sides and sit with the instrumental track as well there. Moving on down after background vocals at the end here, at the far right in my mix window, or at the bottom here, if I have any automation going on, I like to have my effects. So I have my 3 effects that come in my template here. So my plate reverb, my flat plate reverb, so this is vocal reverb, and then instrument reverb, and then a room reverb or the medium studio reverb, usually for drums or anything like that, percussion, that type of stuff there. And then all the way here at the far right, I have my 2 mix buses here. So I have my mix A, which is my pseudo mix bus where everything sends into, and then my mix A sends into my mix bus here with the limiter on it. So I have my mix A in case I want to do, a mix B with a parallel compression on the entire mix or distortion on the entire mix and tuck it underneath. That kind of stuff there. Or if I need to ride a fader, I don't like riding my mix bus fader. I'd rather ride the mix A fader here into the mix bus fader there. And then of course in Studio One, the main faders all the way to the right here. So that's track order. When you're setting up your session and trying to get organized, come up with an order that you always stick with. Whether you're gonna, follow this that we have here, drums, bass, then guitars, so electrics and acoustics, then keyboards, and then effects, stuff like that, then lead vocals, and then background vocals, effects, then your mix bus, whether you want to follow that or whether you want to go in reverse. Some people like to start with the vocals, or I know if you look at like Chris Lord Algae, he'll have like effects down at the end and then skip right at the center of his console. So he has the break in his console where he skips and then does drums. So he'll do drums, bass, and then jump down to the other end of the console and do guitars and vocals and stuff like that. Come up with something that you like, that works for you, whether you're working on a console, an actual analog desk, or just working inside your Pro Tools session or your Studio One session. Get it set up, get an order set that you always follow. So every time you open up a session, no matter what kind of music, you always have the same track order. So drums, bass, guitars, keys, vocals, effects, and then your mix bus. That's tip number one, is setting your track order. Tip number two is picking colors for your track. Now this can seem kind of tedious or maybe useless right at face value, but setting colors for your tracks and sticking to them helps you find things much easier and much faster when you're in the heart of a mix. So you're working on a vocal and maybe something jumps out on the drums. You're like, ooh, that was a little weird on the drums. So instead of having to zoom out and be like, okay, where are my drums at? You'll know, oh, my drums are blue. There's the blue tracks up at top here. I can find what I need on the drums there. That's the reason for track color. Helps you find things easier, especially if your names aren't the best, and especially if you don't want to go looking through a bunch of names if you have lots of tracks here. Track colors for me, you can kind of see here broken down. I have a little bit of breakdown inside these different groups, but just overarching themes. So for me, drums are blue, and you can see the main drum tracks here are this kind of darker blue, and then any kind of percussion or reverse cymbals and effects, stuff like that for drums are always going to be this light blue or aqua color here. Moving on down from there, we have bass guitar. Bass guitar is always red for me. You can see our bass DI and amp colored red here. And if you don't know how to color tracks inside of Studio One, you just click where the color is over here on the side of the track, and then you can pick any of the colors that you need for your tracks there. So bass guitar is red. Guitars are green, and more specifically electric guitars are this darker shade of green here. And then acoustic guitars, you can see, are a lighter shade of green. So, but green for guitars, G and G, felt it worked best. But darker green for electrics, lighter green for acoustics. Keyboards are always this pink color here. It's always the far one, if I can get it with the zoomed out window. I can't get it with the zoomed out window. If I zoom in here, it's this far right one here. That's the pink color I like to use on keyboards there. Moving down from there, from our keyboards, I go into vocals. But if I'm not going into vocals immediately, if I have other stuff that I need to find, let me see. I can get it pretty well on the reverse cymbal here, so percussion. If I have effects, or not effects, if I have any orchestration or stuff in between the keys and the vocals, I like to shoot for this brown color here. Any kind of light orange or brown color usually works pretty well for me for orchestration there. But moving down after our keys and orchestration, lead vocals are always yellow for me. I like this medium color yellow here, not too bright, not too dark. And then background vocals are always this nice darker purple here. And again, if I have harmony vocals and stuff, those will go right in with the lead vocal and they'll be the same yellow. If I feel the need to separate the lead vocal and harmony vocals, sometimes I'll pick, a lighter yellow. That way I can differentiate between the lead vocals and the harmony vocals there. But more often than not, I just keep them the same color here. That's tip number 2, using colors to distinguish all your different tracks, and so you can find groups of tracks much easier. So if you're looking for something on the drums, if you're looking for something on the keys, you'll know your keys are pink, your drums are blue, background vocals are purple, that kind of stuff. Looking for things in the mix, sometimes if your mix window is very large, and if you're very zoomed out, or even if you're zoomed in, right? So if we zoom in more here, being able to scroll quickly and, okay, drums are blue, where's my bass? I know my bass is red, there's my bass guitar. Instead of having to scroll through the side window here and look, okay, here's my electric guitars, here's my bass guitar, that kind of stuff. Colors can very easily help you find things inside your mix. So far we have track order. Track order is putting your tracks in the same order every time. So drums, bass, guitars, keys, vocals, effects, mix bus. Tip number 2 was track color. So if we look here, zooming out, drums are blue, bass is red, guitars are green, keys are pink, lead vocals are yellow, and background vocals are purple. Now, tip number 3 is kind of going to go, it's two-parter depending on what you have available to you inside your DAW, but it's going to be buses and folders. So I have a little bit of a convoluted busing system sometimes, depending on the size of the session, but we're going to go over overarching buses here. So for drums, you can see all my drums here send into the drums bus, and that's this guy at the far end here. That way I have a master fader control for all the drums. So when I get to that later point in the mix and things are tweaked, at the individual track level, and then I'm doing like larger tweaks, maybe the drums are too loud, I can always just come over the drums here and bump them down a little bit without having to highlight all the drums and pull the drums down. And then I'm changing the way they send to the reverb and blah, blah, blah. All that interconnected stuff inside the drum bus there. Moving on down, bass guitar, so bass DI, bass amp, send to a bass bus here. This is our bass bus, and this helps because I can do the processing for the bass guitar on the bass bus here. And same thing with the drums if I want to do any drum bus processing, but I like to process the DI and the amp together. They are one instrument to me, right? I don't need to mix the DI and mix the amp separately and balance them together. I set them where I want them and then mix them as one instrument because to me the bass guitar is one instrument there. Moving over, 2 guitar buses here. I have an electrics guitar bus and then an acoustics guitar bus. And if I need to do any tweaking on the electric guitars as a whole, I can do it here on the bus. And then you can see I have a pair of acoustic guitars here, a stereo pair, and then I'll do my processing for them right here on the bus. They're both sending into it, and then I can use that fader here to balance those guitars overall inside the mix. Keys bus here, so the piano and the organ both send into the keys bus, and if I need to do any processing there, if I need to roll off the low end on all the keys, I can throw that on there and do that. If I had any kind of strings or orchestration, I would have an orchestration bus here. Moving over, I have a Vox bus, and because I only have one lead vocal, I keep that at 0, and then do my processing right here on the vocal bus. That way, if I need to duplicate anything, add any doubles, or add any effects, all of that's sending right here, right off of the vocal bus, and I can have a master level for that. That way, if I need to push harder into the compressor and stuff too, I can do it right from the lead vocal track, rather than having to push the input on the compressor. Moving over here, I have my background vocal bus, so you can see all 6 background vocals send into the background vocal bus. And instead of doing individual processing on each track here, I can treat them as a whole, because to me the background vocals in this track are one instrument. No use processing each individual track here. You're not going to hear them by themselves. You're going to hear them as a whole. So I can do the processing right here on the bus and then use that bus fader to balance it inside the mix. Now I used to have an effects bus here down at the end. I never really used it to the extent that I kept it inside my template, but I used to send all of my effects to an effects bus as well. And then if I had to do any kind of automation or EQ to my effects overall, I would do it there on the bus. But I didn't use it to the extent that I felt I needed to keep it inside my mix template. So that's not there anymore. But if you do need that, you need something like that, or you want that kind of control, feel free to put that bus inside your mix as well. And then of course I have my mix A and my mix bus, where all my bus faders are sending to inside my mix here. Now folders go right hand in hand with buses for me, at least for the big group buses here. So all of the drums send to that drum bus, and then you can see I have the little folder icon because I have this folder here inside my edit window where I can folder all of the drums, and that folder is linked directly to the bus here. So this bus fader is linked directly to our drum folder. So we can close all our drums if we don't need to see our drums. Maybe we just want to see our bass guitar, stuff like that. And you can see same thing with our bass guitar, right? We have our group bus here where our bass track's sent to, and it's linked directly to our folder. And the way you do that is if you have a bus set up inside Studio One here, and then you create a folder. So if you highlight 2 tracks, right click and come down to, oh lordy, pack folder. You can pack these 2 tracks into a folder. Obviously they're already packed into a folder, and then you'll have this little drop down here to choose what bus channel that folder links to there. And you can see it's set up across the board here. So the electric guitar folder, acoustic guitars have an acoustic guitar folder, keys have their keys folder, same thing for the lead vocal and the background vocals. And if I had one For effects, I would probably folder my effects too, but one of the reasons, again, that I kind of moved away from foldering all my effects is I liked to keep my room mic emulation down here by the drums and send it into the drum bus folder rather than having it all the way at the other end. The other effects I rarely touch besides pulling their volume down. I'll actually work on the drum room emulation, so I keep that right here by the drums, and that's the only thing that sends to it. Sometimes I'll send other stuff to the plate reverbs or the medium studio reverb, so I keep those down here separate from the other effects that are only for the drums. Those are our 3 tips here for organizing your session and potentially speeding up your mix process. So in review here, tip number 1 is track order. So if we zoom out here inside our session, you can see the track order here. Oh, we'll zoom back out there so we have everything. We have drums, then bass, then guitar, so more specifically electrics, then acoustics, keys, then vocals, so lead vocals and background vocals. Tip number 2 is track color, so you can find things a lot easier and a lot faster inside your mix. So for me, drums are blue, bass is red, guitars are green, keyboards are pink, lead vocals or harmony vocals are yellow, and background vocals are purple. And then tip number 3 was buses and folders to group tracks together. So all the drums sending into the drum bus up top here, bass guitar, bass tracks sending into the bass folder here, the bass bus, electric guitars send into the electric guitars folder, same thing with the acoustics, sending the acoustics folder, keys, piano, and organ are sending into the keys bus, lead vocals and any kind of harmony vocals are sending into the vocal bus here, and then all the background vocals are sending into the background vocals there. So track order, track color, and then folders and buses will help you organize your session and get through your mix faster. I hope that was helpful for you. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're ready to level up your mixes and really start dialing in your workflow as an engineer, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and you can download it below to start creating more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.